Hello again, and this will be the 11th video in my series of Horror Nights history for Halloween Horror Nights 19, ripped from the silver screen. And in part 10, previous to this, I have been talking about the house Silver Screams, the iconic house for Julian Browning, the usher, featuring many different scenes from different horror films presented within the grand and glorious Universal Palace Theatre. Yes. And I've been talking about how over the years Universal had developed this particular style of house from the earlier versions of multiplex, if you will, that is to say, films, haunted houses based on horror films, but those that were based on several different horror films, where you go from scene to scene, and how they had progressed from just randomly going from one scene to another in horror movies to this house in 2009, where they were able to work it into an overall narrative, where you would go from various from the entering the cinema and going through the cinema lobby into the different horror movies, and in between you find yourself back in the Universal Palace Theatre again as you go through the corridors before you enter another scene in a different horror film. Yes, and I talked about that, and I had discussed also how the way that they had acquired rights for different properties for houses had changed tremendously by 2009, because when they're doing these using intellectual properties in the 90s, they had never really bothered to get the rights officially, because it wasn't really that sort of thing. It was a temporary Halloween event that was only going on for a few days, and then it was gone, and they could utilize these characters unofficially, not really calling them by name, but the people attending would recognize, iconic horror movie slashers and creatures. And then next thing you know, the event was done and they wouldn't have to worry about it. But that things began to change around the year 2006, when there was some controversy with whichever company it was that had made the Ring films. It might have been Sony, Columbia, it might have been 20th Century, Paramount, one of those. I don't remember which one it was, but whatever it was, they got a little bit irate. It might even have been DreamWorks or something. I think it was DreamWorks. They got a bit irate because because of the issue with because they did that scene with Samara in the All Night Die-In Take 2 back in 2006, and they had to do something about that. And again, I said I didn't know what that was exactly that they did. So I talked about all of that in part 10, and then how in 2000 and how they then began to acquire rights in a more contractual way. Of course, that had given them some limitations as well. As I mentioned, 2007 they had a contract with New Line Cinema to bring the three main characters of Freddy, Jason, Leatherface. They also contracted with, but most of the other things they used in that particular event were for example, The Thing and Dead Silence had been Universal properties to begin with, you see, back in 2007. Well, in 2009, it was more prominently a cinematic year than even 2007 had been. There was no carnival of carnage going on. This time it was all about the movies, right? But still, even then, they hadn't quite reached where they are today, as I had been saying, where to this nowadays, acquiring rights for what properties they're going to use is one of their primary agendas, even as early as January, because especially with certain recent events. There was a cat. I saw a cat. Recent events last year, for example, which were a real scream. Oh, I'm sorry, it wasn't. Excuse me, I have to purge myself, if you know what I mean there. So, they want to get all their ducks in a row early, apparently, nowadays. At least that's what I have been told by people who are spreading rumors, and I don't know if that's true. I'd have no idea, but it seems to me, just looking at the tweets from Michael Aiello and John Murdy, it seems to me from official channels what people had said at the forums the other night, the designer forums, the officially released information that's trickling out, the dates for the event, all of these things are coming bloody early this year. I mean, it's only the first Sunday in March, for Christ's sakes, and we've got information officially that we normally don't get until summer. Laura Wallace said they're going to start casting any day now. She said this at the design forum the other night. Casting? Casting. This is March. Casting usually is in September. I mean, not September. I mean, in July or something. June maybe, but in the summertime. Well, why would they start casting now? Maybe they're going to make commercials? I don't know. Earlier than last year? Of course, I know that the commercial they made last year, they had to cut a whole scene out because Scream had to be removed from the actual commercial that they eventually showed. But they didn't even shoot that this early. I mean, I know because I remember when Jimmy and Erin said they were going to Budapest last year, because on Facebook, so I know that that's when they shot that commercial, because they shot it in Budapest, and so it's easy to figure out when they went when that was done, but that was still nowhere near as early as March. So. What the hell? What could it be that they're casting this early? Some people have high hopes and are saying maybe it's going to be an icon. I don't know. I have no idea. I wouldn't hold my breath. But it intrigues me. Why so early this year? My goodness. And it could be, and this is pure speculation, it could be they want to get all their ducks in a row with all the IPs and get all the rights secured as early as possible and get all that sort of thing done so that there'll be no troubles this year with the rights to whatever they want to do based on some of the things that have happened before in the years. I digress, of course, but it does refer back to what was going on in 2009. Because in 2009, that was still, even though it was a major IP-heavy year, the first really all about the movies year they did, nevertheless, they had to negotiate with one, Lionsgate, and that was it, because the rest of it was Universal. Dracula, Frankenstein, Wolfman, Chucky, Universal. And in Silver Screams, what they did in Silver Screams, Phantom of the Opera, The Thing, what was the other one? Shaun of the Dead, and The Strangers, all of those films had been released by Universal or Universal subsidiaries, like at that time, like Rogue, which was a part of Universal at that time. There was a division of Focus at that time, and Focus is also a division of Universal. Things can change since then, but what have you. So, those were all basically Universal things. There were two exceptions, however. Army of Darkness, which had been released by Universal, but there were some issues there, which I will get to, and of course, the other one was My Bloody Valentine, which was not Universal at all, but Lionsgate. And so here we go. This was rather interesting. So they did do Saw. They wanted Saw. They needed Saw. Saw was a big horror property at that time. Remember, in the 2000s, Saw, I think, came out in 2004. And then every bloody Halloween every year, an annual event. It became like the Simpsons Treehouse or Horror Nights itself. Something you were looking forward to every Halloween. You know, it became an annual thing. The new Saw film coming out, 2004, 2005, 2006, 2007, 2008. You know, that's the way it was. So that 2009, it was already Saw 6 coming out in the cinemas. It would go on for one more year with the Saw 3D, right? And that's a cat. She's got saw claws. She's coming to get me. Want to play a game? Yes, that's Bob. Not Billy, it's Bob. So anyway, they want that. That's a hot property. It was at a high point in its popularity. And there was a group going around that working with Lionsgate to put in haunted attractions. And so they worked out a contract with these people. And they leaked it. Yes, way early in the year. But here's what I think also happened. You see, I remember reading about a certain cinematic scandal. Not really scandal, but a bit of controversy back in the day. You know, studios make films, and then a lot of them distribute their own film, but there are some that have to give their films over to, or they have a contract with a distribution company, perhaps a totally different studio, because not everybody distributes films. So the distributors are sometimes not the same studio or production company that makes the film. And then those distributors sell them to the cinemas, or rent them, however you want to call it. They pay to have the film in their cinemas, the theatres, the cinema owners themselves. Now, of course, nowadays you have massive chains like AMC and Odeon, Cineplex, and what's the other one, Regal. All of these big, chains. That's locally in this area, but I know there are others around the country. In Hawaii, it was all consolidated theatres, and what was the other one? The Royal Theatres. Royal seemed to go out of business after a while. It's almost become a monopoly with consolidated. You also have second-run houses, and you have the grind houses, or at least you used to. I think those are all gone now. Those are back in the 70s and early 80s. And somewhere in the country there might be a few drive-ins left, although not many, especially now that everything's gone digital. You can't really do that on the big projector. It's, that's a big projector screen. Can you imagine? Drive-in cinema's not really set up to do digital. I don't think it would. I'm not sure it'd even work. It might, but it's they're not going to pay the money it takes to redo that. And if there's no actual film left anymore to show in a projector, how can you run your cinema unless you just show old movies? That's the only way they can do it, you see. So all of that's going on. So they actually buy these, or not really buy, but they pay to have them shown in their cinemas. But here's the thing. And of course, they make most of their money from the concessions, the hot dogs, the candy you buy. That's actually been true forever, but that's another story. But what they do though in the cinemas is what they used to do at least is when they go, then of course they bring all the theater owners in. They have screenings and they have these like almost conventions and fairs and packages what they're going to be showing in the upcoming year, and they say, buy this, get this one. You want to show this movie? It's going to be great. People want to see it, and then it's almost like because they can reject. They can say, no, I don't want to show that movie in my theater. No one's going to come and see it. We don't have that kind of audience. And the person who has an art house cinema, like the Enzian here in Orlando, they can say, oh no, I want this weird French movie about lesbian ducks, and subtitles in black and white. I want that because people are going to want to see that. And the people that come to my theater and sit there and eat weird sandwiches and watch the movie, they're going to want to see this movie. Even though the person who has the multiplex in a shopping mall says, bloody hell, I'm not going to show that. That's awful. So that's what happens here. So what happened is you began to have some of the studio people say, okay, you want to get this big, huge blockbuster film that's going to be a tentpole, and it's going to be one of the big summer hits, and it's going to make millions and millions of dollars. You want to show this in your cinema? fine. But the only way you're going to do it will let you have that, but only if you also agree to show this other film, which we know sucks and is going to be a bomb. But you have to get both. It's a package deal. You can't just get the one. You can't show the good one without taking the bad one too. And there was some controversy back a few years ago about that sort of practice. Now, I don't know if that's the sort of thing that actually happened here with Lionsgate, but I suspect it might be. I don't know. No one's told me any bloody thing about this. I don't get inside information in advance anymore. But, of course, I get it after the fact, because God knows I've talked to a lot of these people, especially at the event, and they don't mind telling you about what they did in the past if it's something that can be talked about. You know, they can't tell you what they're going to do because that would, you know, be, well, among other things, spoilers. But they're happy to talk about what they've done before. Everyone likes to tell you about what their accomplishments. So they say, oh yeah, back in, you know, '06 or whatever, we were building this house and we'd had this and this and that and that. And you find out stuff about what they did back then, you know, and people like TJ or Mike or Rick or some of the others, that, you know, when you meet them, various things that they're doing or when they have their sessions and things like that for them the other night, you know, for example, or anything. And you hear these things, so it's quite interesting. And it's not that hard to do if you meet up with these people and learn about what they used to do. But I don't know in this case, because they don't like to talk about the contractual stuff, obviously, so I have no idea. This is all theory. But it wouldn't surprise me in the least if Lionsgate said, okay, you want Saw. You want Saw because it's a big horror franchise, and we're putting a new Saw film out in the cinemas every year for the past 5 years, and it's a hit and people love it. So you want Saw because it's a big name, a big brand you want for Horror Nights this year. But you can only have Saw if you agree to take My Bloody Valentine with it. Because My Bloody Valentine bombed in the box office. It wasn't a big hit. We tried to revive a horror film from the 80s to reboot it and get it going, but it's always hit and miss when you do that. Sometimes when you tamper with a classic, so to speak, you can, oh, it's just as good or better or more popular now than it was back then. Sometimes everyone goes, and it collapses. You never know. It's like, and that film, even though it had the cute boy from Supernatural in it, that Jensen Ackles or whatever his name is, weird name. Anyway, even though it just didn't quite hit. It missed. You know, it was in 3D too, but it still did. You know, and they were quite miffed about that, but they're trying to make up for the box office failure by releasing it on home video, of course, on Blu-rays and DVDs and all what have you. So how are they going to do that? Back then, actually 2009, I don't know if they might have had HD DVD by then, I don't remember. And Blu-ray came after that, and then it became sort of a format war before which one was going to win, we didn't know yet. But at the time it was like, okay, here's this new movie. We're going to release it on home video shortly, and we want any sort of advertising, any publicity, having it featured at a huge horror event. And by 2009, you know, Halloween Horror Nights had become something for horror movie fans, nut jobs that go on reading Fangoria, you know, Rue Morgue magazine, etc. They're going to want to go to Horror Nights. They want to learn about it. They want to see it. And so they're going to get exposed to this. And so maybe the folks who didn't see the movie in the cinema when it came out will now go out and buy the damn DVD so they can see it at home. And we can get this going. That was their hope. But, of course, so in other words, if you want Saw, then you have to get the other one with it. That's the idea that I think went on. Of course, I don't know if that's a fact, but that's my theory, because other than Saw, My Bloody Valentine was the only outside IP that they used that year, and all the others were all in-house, so they wouldn't have to pay any additional rights fees to put on the event. So in spite of all the variety of films they had at the whole event of Halloween Horror Nights 19, there were only 2 that came from outside Universal. Therefore, you see. And here I've talked 2 whole 20-minute videos about Silver Screams, and I haven't even described a single scene in the house yet. Ding dong! Oh well, sorry about that. Third video, or rather number 12, which is the next one, I promise I will describe the scenes in the houses of Silver Screams. I promise. Hopefully. I'm such a silly person.